The Armenian Genocide refers to physical annihilation of the Armenian people living in the Ottoman Empire from the spring of 1915 to autumn 1916. It is sometimes referred to as the first genocide of the 20th century. Armenia has existed for over a millennium and is a dominating Christian living in Constantinople, which is run by the Ottoman Empire. In the late 19th century, the empire was crumbling. In 1914, the Turks entered the First World War alongside Germany and Austro-Hungarian Empire. Military leaders argued that the Armenians were traitors, and after general Turkish suspicion of the Armenian, led the Turkish government to push for the removal of Armenians from war zones along the Eastern Front. On the 24th of April 1915, the genocide began. The Turkish government arrested and executed several hundred Armenians. After that day, ordinary Armenians were turned out of their homes and sent on death marches through the Mesopotamian desert without food or water. Frequently, the marchers were stripped naked and forced to walk under the scorching sun until they dropped dead. People who stopped to rest were shot. Up to 1.2 million Armenians died. So why is this important today? Well, 107 years later, the Turkish government, the successor of the Ottoman Empire, repeatedly denies that the genocide even took place. One of the reasons being a repercussion if acknowledged, which is painful for Armenian communities. Evidence states that Turkey continues to reframe history by blaming and dehumanizing Armenians. In fact, it is illegal in Turkey to even mention the Armenian Genocide. Researchers and journalists who have openly spoken about the Armenian Genocide in Turkey have been prosecuted, received death threats, and viewed as enemies by the Turkish government. An example would be Ali Kemal, the great-grandfather of Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who was a Turkish journalist who spoke about the Armenian genocide and ended up getting kidnapped from a barber shop on the European side of Istanbul and taken across the Asian side of the city. The plan was to trial him for treason, but while passing the city of Izmit, he was set up upon paramilitary forces loyal to Ataturk, the president of Turkey at the time. The group battered and bludgeoned Ali Kemal to death with sticks, stones and knives before hanging him from a tree. Many countries such as the United Kingdom do not recognise the genocide. Imagine Germany today not recognising the Holocaust. Many countries have done wrong things in the past that they are not proud of, and denying it does not bring any closure. I am now going to be interviewing Misak Ohinian from the Armenian Advice Centre as well as Arif Milikian, part of the Armenian Society at UCL, to ask them questions about the Armenian genocide. How did you first hear about the genocide? Was it something you got taught when you were a child?
Yes, it was something that I was told about when I was a child. In fact, my grandfather, who was a survivor of the genocide, he was, I think, about 7 years of age when he was forced to leave his town in what is now southeastern Turkey, and he was forced to march in the Syrian deserts. And he told me about his life experiences at that age, when I myself was only maybe, 3, 4, 5 years old.
Yeah, I think it was something that I grew up knowing about. My dad would talk about it sometimes. I'm in quite an interesting situation because my dad is Armenian, but my mum is Turkish. So it was talked about at home, but not too much. I know that it's talked about more in other households, like full Armenian households.
What effect does this have on Armenians today?
Well, obviously, what effect that has on Armenians today, it very much depends on, one, how much of that experience was transmitted to the current generation or the second or third generation of Armenians in diaspora or in Armenia or abroad. So some families, as I said earlier, will not have known what their grandparents or parents went through because they kept it inside and they internalized the pain. Unlike my grandfather, who was prepared to talk about it and share it and to express himself. I would say that every Armenian family knows about what transpired and has been affected in one form or another.
Well, I think what it caused was that it caused a massive diaspora to develop out of it. And I think that means that a lot of Armenian talents and Armenian brilliance and excellence and everything that Armenians can do has been dissipated throughout the world, and a lot of it is in America, and a lot of it is in France and in the UK. And that means that a lot of people whose homeland is Armenia can no longer contribute to that country because they've been displaced quite a lot of time ago. And so it means that I think Armenia as a country would have had so much more potential, but because of the events that happened and because of how people were displaced, that potential was never fully reached. And that's quite a sad thing, I think.
Do you ever feel like there is not that much exposure about genocide, such as kids not learning about it in schools and stuff?
Well, the short answer is yes. There has to be greater education, information, and knowledge transmitted to younger generation, to younger people. Because the last few years, decades, there's been greater attempts to teach people about slavery, about the Jewish Holocaust, and people today can see what happened to the Rwandans and what happened in Cambodia, post-Second World War genocides.
Yes, I do agree with that. I think I agree with the statement. I think that the Armenian Genocide is something, is an event which is somewhat sort of marginalized. People don't know that it happened. It's not talked about. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because comparatively less people were affected as opposed to other genocides, but that's not a fair excuse. That doesn't negate the effect of what happened.
What do you think Turkey could do to, I haven't written this question down, I've just thought of it, about how could Turkey kind of make it up to Armenia? Or no?
Well, I think before we can talk about the Turkish government, because I always talk about the Turkish government, I don't talk about the Turkish people. The Turkish government, once the Turkish people are in charge of their own government and their own destiny, and they have resolved all the underlying injustices that they are experiencing, then they will also be much wiser to also, or part of that process will also be coming to terms not just with the current underlying Armenophobia that is taught to them, but also come to terms with the rights of other minorities in Turkey, the rights of the Kurdish people, the historical injustices caused against the Armenians. Firstly, the Turkish government has to make up has to deal with the underlying challenges that face Turkey, the Turkish Republic or the Turkish nation, the Turkish place in the world. And once it starts to tackle that issue, then the rest, everything else will fall into place. Some people say that, intergovernmental discussions between the Republic of Armenia and Turkey might come to some kind of fruition, or some kind of concessions. I don't see any of that.
That's an interesting question. I think there's a lot of different things. There's compensation in a monetary way, which is far from ideal. There's compensation in a way of inclusivity, because Armenian people are still, or have been for the last 100 years, very much marginalized in Turkey to a significant degree. I've experienced this. I've seen this happen. I've experienced it firsthand. I've seen others experience it. If not, of course, acknowledging what happened is the first step to take. But as I said, I think that's very unlikely, and I think there's actually other things that would be done before Turkey went to doing that, such as monetary compensation, including people, allowing Armenian people's voices to be heard, allowing their opinions to circulate freely, allowing this alternate voice to be heard, if not agreeing with it, if not acknowledging it formally, just allowing that opinion to be propagated. Because so far, it hasn't been so. It's been fairly censored, I think. I think that's going to be a big move forward. And then after that, I think it comes to making amends in a diplomatic way.